Madam President.
Senator from Alaska.
Thank you, Madam President. Clearly, some very, very serious subjects that are being discussed today. I applaud my colleague from Kentucky for bringing up the tough stuff. We cannot escape our reality, and our reality is, as he says, it is in the entitlements that we will finally grapple with the insurmountable debt that we are faced with as a nation. Some very, very difficult issues in front of us with equally difficult solutions. So as we stand and present them, try to educate one another, much less those that we represent across the countries, this is a critical time for us to be having these discussions, to talk about all the things that need to be on the table. Well, one of the things that is being discussed around family dinner tables in the evening is what is happening in this country as it relates to the price of oil and how that translates more personally to American families who every time they go to fill up the car or the minivan or whatever it is that they're driving, it is costing them more and more. Every time you pick up a newspaper, every time you turn on the TV, we're seeing a story about the rising prices of oil. And they're asking, well, why? What's going on? I mean, obviously, they look at the situation in the Middle East and the combination of international events that is driving it. But, Madam President, it's also our domestic policies in this country that have helped to push oil above $100 a barrel. I think all of us here are concerned about what those higher prices mean for us as a nation. We're absolutely committed to protecting the American people and our businesses, and how we ensure that we have an ability to deal with these rising prices at the same time that we're trying to crawl out from this difficult recessionary period. This is a tough time for us. So I've come to the floor today to outline several steps that I think that we can and we should take to improve our nation's energy policy. First, I want to touch just for a moment on how we again find ourselves in this situation. The civil unrest that we're seeing, the political instability in other nations are certainly not new. They're facts of life in many of the nations that provide this nation's imports. Iran now holds OPEC's presidency. They're perfectly comfortable with $100 barrel oil. And it's far from guaranteed that OPEC is even capable of moderating any prices in the way that it claims that they can with spare capacity. With Libya's supply either offline or unreliable, any other disruption, any kind, anywhere in the world, can likely spike global oil prices to levels that will swamp our economic recovery and result in truly a genuine hardship for America's family. Now, I suggested at the beginning of my comments that it's not just the situation internationally that has brought us to this point. The costs and consequences associated with our dependence on foreign oil are largely our own fault. We have brought this upon ourselves. Over the years, our lands have been locked up. Many of our most promising opportunities have been completely put out of reach. Here in this country, we sit on tremendous oil reserves in the offshore, whether it's up in Alaska, offshore in the Chukchi or the Beaufort, whether it's in the Gulf of Mexico. We have onshore opportunities in my home state that are inconsiderable. We have them in the Rocky Mountain West. We have massive shale formations that aren't even accessible for research and development. We can't even begin to look. Charles Krauthammer, who's the columnist, wrote last year, he says, "We haven't run out of safer and more easily accessible sources of oil. We've been run off them." I couldn't agree with him more. Today, our energy policy has gone beyond frustrating. It's irresponsible. It's simply irresponsible at times. The American people expect their government to help keep energy affordable and to see to it that we can benefit from our natural resource development in a responsible way. That's what they're asking for. They expect us to take an honest look at where increased domestic production is possible, how it can protect against the higher prices like we're seeing now, how it can protect against potential supply disruption, and what it will do, what domestic production will do to increase our security, restore our trade balance. That's what we're all talking about here on the floor today. Generate government revenues, create jobs. Right now, when we import oil, we are exporting those benefits. It's our loss and it's their gain. And we ignore the positive benefits of domestic production, I think, really at our own peril. About a month ago, we had a hearing in the Energy Committee, and there was a statement that was presented in hearing. It's a statement that comes out of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and it's a pretty sobering reminder to us all. The statement was, a $1 one-day increase in a barrel of oil takes $12 million out of the U.S. economy. If tensions in the Mideast cause oil prices to rise by $5 for just even 3 months, over $5 billion will leave the U.S. economy. Obviously, this is not a strategy for creating new jobs. This was the statement from the Bipartisan Policy Center. That was about a month ago. So think about what's happened in the course of a month and where we've seen the price of oil go. About a month ago, it was sitting at about $82 a barrel. We're now over $100 a barrel. We're looking at $20 in the past month. And what that means to us in terms of dollars that have been sent outside of our economy, it's about $15 billion. Last year, putting in context of what went on last year in this country, we spent an estimated $337 billion on oil imports last year. A huge amount of money for us. And as we're talking about how we deal with budget battles and decide which programs and services to continue to terminate, this has incredible impact on the discussion. So today I'm renewing my call for a realistic and really a very aggressive approach to our energy challenges for the sake of our national security, for the sake of our economy, and for the sake of the world's environment. America should produce as much oil as it uses as is possible. And it's this balance, in concert with the resulting revenues that we will see, the benefits to our manufacturing, our transportation industries, that will really allow us to take control of our energy future. Now, I've got 5 concepts that will support greater domestic oil production, and I'm just going to speak very, very briefly because we'll have time to develop this out. But first of all, look north to Alaska. We used to have that on our license plates, north to Alaska. We have an incredible supply of oil just waiting to be tapped for the good of the nation. The National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, sitting there waiting. 2,000 acres of the non-wilderness portion of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seas hold at least 40 billion barrels of recoverable oil. That's enough to replace crude imports from the Persian Gulf for over 65 years, and we can do this in one state. We've got those opportunities in Alaska. And all 3 areas right now, as we speak, are effectively off limits to new development because of decisions that have been made by this administration or prior administrations. We've got an opportunity if we just look north. Second, end the permitorium and bring back production in the Gulf of Mexico. This administration has slowed the permits for new deep water development to practically a crawl. The Secretary of Interior has announced 1 new permit a couple days ago. That's a start, most clearly, but we are just barely crawling. This could cost the United States an estimated 200,000 barrels of new supply if left in place for a year, far more if left in place longer, and tens of thousands of jobs in the meantime. Courts have also ruled, repeatedly I might add, that the administration's permitorium is unlawful. A district court judge ruled last year that it was arbitrary and capricious, and then more recently, the Interior Department was actually held in contempt for its dismissive conduct and determined disregard. These are the court's words of previous orders to end its de facto moratorium. The third item that we can do, let's cut the red tape. Let's make this work. In January, the President ordered his executive agencies to review their regulations to ensure that they're cost-effective, that they're not unduly damaging economic growth and job creation. Great task, necessary. The Interior Department, though, is sitting in a situation where they've got an awful lot of work to do. In late 2008, the Interior Department stated that the number of required plan and permit approvals is on the order of about 25 to 30 for a typical oil lease. 25 to 30 for a typical oil lease. And yet over the past 2 years, instead of reducing that, this administration has sought to add even more layers to these already significant requirements, which are really a major reason why leaseholders need years to begin production. We just can't get to it. The fourth thing that we need to look at is truly how we as a nation consider this all of the above energy policy. The alternatives to conventional oil, to natural gas, to coal, should not be limited to just kind of the favored sources, wind, solar, geothermal. We have so much that we can be doing. I think we recognize that. I have stood before this body on so many occasions, talked about the different ways that we can build out our energy portfolio, how we can work to move our transportation fleet to that next generation, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's fleets powered by natural gas. The final item in terms of what we can do to help address our nation's energy policy, we need to shelve the bad ideas. There's an awful lot of bad ideas out there that are holding us up. And this is kind of the stop the bleeding element of the proposal. With oil prices on the rise, the administration and many in Congress seem to have forgotten that the oil industry actually provides Americans with energy and with jobs. And yet, sometimes they're viewed as this untapped source of government revenues. Proposals to take more from oil companies have included a range of tax increases, the use it or lose it proposal, similar fees, substantially shorter lease terms. All of these anti-production efforts deprive the companies of stable operating environments. It reduces their willingness to invest in America. I think what we need to do is let's look at what we're doing. And if they're bad ideas, let's set the bad ideas aside. Let's adopt a constructive approach. Instead of seeking to punish, let's figure out a better way forward so that we can tap into more of America's vast resources and then make good use of the resulting revenues. Madam President, we clearly do have options, and I look forward to discussing them more in detail and how we can develop out these goals of a national energy policy. But for today, I would just wrap up by emphasizing that responsible domestic production will reduce our energy prices, create jobs, improve our security, raise revenue to pay down debt, and allow America to invest in technologies for the future. We can't afford to wait on any of these benefits. So I thank the President, and again, I urge us, as we're talking about ways that we reduce our budget, ways that we create more jobs for our country, we need to be looking critically at what is happening with our energy policy in this country. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor.